welcome to Going Over Our Freds, the internet's best Fred Olin Ray based podcast. As always, I am Kennedy, and sitting across from me in Chicago is
Meredith Halsey.
And we have a special guest today for the first time in studio, and by in studio meaning on the same Zoom call. And who is that?
I'm Milwaukee's very own Joe Drilling.
So, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes.
You've got a history of podcasts and some background, not dissimilar from Fred Olin Ray, in that Fred Olin Ray and yourself do have a professional wrestling background.
I did a podcast on professional wrestling, which you're well aware of. That's how we became acquainted. You were actually going to be a guest on it before we abandoned it because we got exhausted from watching 3-hour-long WCW Nitros that had 3 Eric Bischoff Hulk Hogan promos on them.
And they had to introduce Thunder. And
no, we had already decided we weren't going to do Thunder and SmackDown.
Oh, that's
like that decision had already been made. Nevertheless, we were just like, I can't do 5 hours of old wrestling every week, especially when So the show was called What a Maneuver. It was a week-by-week rundown of the Monday Night Wars era, which I feel like we were a little bit ahead of the curve on. And now, the Wrestling Bios YouTube channel is doing basically the same thing and is way more popular than we ever were. But we were downloading 40 gig torrents of VHS rips of Nitro and Raw because it was before WWE Network existed. So that was sort of how we did that, and we just kind of got exhausted of it. We also used to do a podcast called The Action Cast, which was a movie podcast about mostly action movies, sometimes horror movies, which we brought back a couple years ago, and we've kind of petered out on doing that, but I think it's never gone for good. And then the main thing I did and again, it was a podcast. We used to do the onthestick.com bi-weekly video game podcast, which is now just a weekly live stream that we do every Wednesday. And as also, in terms of professional wrestling, I was a professional wrestler for a time. I've also been in some bad, cheap movies, some of which you can watch on Tubi right now. So,
Yay!
Wait, there are no cheap movies on Tubi. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right? You should look up one. I don't remember if it's under the original title of Carnivorous or under the later title of Hell's Labyrinth, but I die in the opening scene. And my friend Bryce, when he reviewed the movie on his blog, I believe he asked me how I got trapped inside the Super Nintendo port of Doom. That's the level of special effects that we're talking about in that particular film.
Is it Albert Pune who has the movie Arcade? That's a similar situation there. All right. Well, we let Joe pick the movie. So what movie did you pick?
I chose Fred Olin Ray's 1995 magnum opus, Bikini Drive-In, which I chose, I think, primarily because as a elder millennial child of the 90s, I consumed a borderline unhealthy amount of softcore pornography on Cinemax as a teenager. And I am a huge lover of drive-ins, of Joe Bob Briggs. As Joe Bob Briggs says, as long as there is one drive-in theater in America, the drive-in will never die.
This movie struck me more as a USA Up All Night feature, just with the sex scenes put back in. And it seemed like there were a bunch of people on the internet saying that it was, but I couldn't find any of the Rhonda Shear clips for it. I assume this would have been a Rhonda Shear episode and not a Gilbert Gottfried episode, because Gilbert Gottfried prefers his nudity to be incidental, like a naked person changing a light bulb, versus actual sex scenes.
Right. Also, actual sex scenes is doing a lot of heavy lifting when you're talking about this movie, because I don't think any of these actors have ever had sex before, given the way that they perform it in this film.
Well, you stay in a position for a couple of seconds, and then you cut to a different position, and then you cut to a third position, and you film it like a toothpaste commercial, and then boom, it's sex.
My hips are often completely stationary during the act of coitus. That's normal for me. So it seems realistic to me.
It's a callback to the movie Sledgehammer and the sex scenes in that. Anyway, Meredith, let's get started with the movie. How does this just special film start?
Well, I'm going to give you what I firmly believed was the premise when starting to watch this movie. It might make you uncomfortable.
Your idea of the movie. Okay.
Yes. So 2 teenage girls are sunbathing on a beach while their middle-aged boyfriends toss a football back and forth. That is what is presented in the opening scene.
They do talk about I'm not going to summer school.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the friend is, I think she's about 19 or something like that when they filmed the movie. But the main character is
Kim Taylor is the character name.
Is the main character name, and her name is Ashley Ray. Neither of those names is spelled like it ought to be spelled. And she was full on 32 when this movie was filmed and 34 when it came out. So she is definitely not a teenager.
Okay, so I think we all watched this on Vimeo. I came this close to ordering the Blu-ray. I want you all to know that. Like, I almost ordered the Blu-ray. And in hindsight, I kind of wish I had, because the Vimeo version is 480p. It looks like garbage. And it's presented in 4:3, even though this was actually shot on film. And 16 mil, it's shot on 16 millimeter and transferred to 35 millimeter for its alleged theatrical exhibition, which... okay, sure.
Sure, why not? But it was shot on a CP16 that was bought by Fred Olen Ray from David Dakota.
Oh, there you go. Was it the same CP16 that shot, like, Sorority Babes in the Slime Bowl-orama, or?
It very well might have been, but I know when David Dakota sold it, he's like, now sell it back to me when you're done, okay? Because I want this back.
Incredible. It did look like hot garbage.
Yeah, but I will say that looking at it as in the way that it was presented, she does not look her age at all in this movie. No. She definitely can pass for like at least mid-20s, whereas the dude who plays her boyfriend, I am in my 40s, and that dude's hairline is retreating faster than mine is. So I did like him being like, oh, it's summer vacation, babe. I was like, from what? Are you a professor? Like, what?
He looked like that dude who played Thor in The Return of the Incredible Hulk to me. It wasn't him. Eric Allen Kramer.
Mm-hmm.
He just looked like the porn version of Eric Allen Kramer, who I think, people under 40 might know as the dad in Good Luck Charlie. But
I mean, look, if you don't know, like, fur coat wearing pre-Chris Hemsworth live action Thor, I don't know what to tell you other than you really should go seek out those old Incredible Hulk TV movies with Bill Bixby and that dude as Thor. Yeah.
Let's get back to the beach.
Yeah, so their middle-aged boyfriends are playing football and not paying attention to them, and the girls are bored. And
the girls are bored, yes.
They're just going to be bored all summer, right? Nothing's going to happen.
They don't have jobs, and they're, like, not going to get jobs, which is, in my mind, cementing that they're too young to really have to worry about it. They're not paying rent. They don't have jobs. It's fine.
Yeah.
They have middle-aged boyfriends who didn't when they were a teenage girl. And then they declare, well, since the boys are too busy playing catch with each other and racing to the pier, they're just going to go topless for a little while because, and I quote, they hate tan lines.
I think it's interesting that it is the friend, not our main character, but the sidekick who initially declares that she hates tan lines, but she has very pronounced tan lines. And then when our main character goes like, oh yeah, like me too, she does, like, as if she's kind of being peer pressured into the like topless sunbathing thing. She does not have tan lines.
I think that might be one of the few continuity errors in this movie. Otherwise, tight, super tight.
Yeah, no, whoever the line producer was on this one really was putting in overtime hours for sure, because there's just nary mistake to be seen.
But I hope someone was fired for that blunder.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
The friend's name is Carrie. We learn much, much later in the movie that her boyfriend's name is Bobby. Our main character's name is Kim. And her boyfriend, the aging man with a receding hairline, his name is Daryl.
Daryl was played by an actor named George Cost, who doesn't have an age on his IMDb page, I regret to inform you. So I can't tell you how old he was when he made this film, but what I can tell you is that he hasn't had much of a career.
Yeah, he's got like 4 credits, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, and 2 of them are as additional crew.
All right, so we're on the beach, got a couple of topless women, or teenage girls, for all we know at this point. They are sunbathing. We've got some guy in a suit and a briefcase coming up, leering at them for a brief second before he reveals that he's an attorney. Kim has come into an inheritance, and his job is to deliver the inheritance. And what is the inheritance but her now deceased granddad's drive-in theater?
I can't believe you'd refer to him as some guy. This is at least the third movie we've seen him in.
We have not. That's a lie.
That's Hulk Howell. He was the hillbilly in Alienator. He was the bartender and the shooter. We've seen him in 3 different decades in this podcast already, and we haven't done that many movies.
Well, I didn't recognize him. He was in a suit this time.
That's a celebrity cameo right there. But, like all lawyers do, he goes to the beach to deliver this inheritance news. Because, how else are you going to find somebody?
Yeah, I have no idea. Well, it turns out that this drive-in movie theater is called the El Monte. And because their boyfriends are still hanging out with each other, Kim and Carrie decide to get off the beach and check out this drive-in theater because it might be their summer project, which is, a wonderful thing because they've been looking for something to do with their summer.
Yeah.
So, the El Monte Drive-In was a real drive-in theater on Lower Azusa Road in El Monte, California. It had one screen, which is very strange to me when I see drive-ins with one screen, because the one that I grew up near had the screen was a big concrete, from the side it looked like an obelisk, it was like a big concrete structure, and then their projectors pointed towards the middle. So one side was one screen and the other side was the other screen. And a lot of other drive-ins that I've been to have just 2 screens at the opposite ends of the long, it's a big property, and at one end is one screen, at the other end is the other screen. So it is strange to me for a drive-in of the drive-in boom period, which this one apparently opened on July 2nd, 1948. You would think they would have multiple screens. That's sort of strange to me, but it was a single screen drive-in. And in the 70s, when drive-ins were kind of initially on the wane, they changed to just showing movies in Spanish, which for that part of the country makes some sense. Yeah,
you're halfway between LA and West Covina, basically.
Yeah, and then about 6 years after they filmed this, 5 or 6 years after they filmed this movie, it was torn down and they put a Home Depot there.
Oh.
The fate of a shocking number of drive-ins is to make space for a Home Depot or something like it.
Yeah, my home drive-in was a single-screen drive-in, a lot like this, with one snack bar, and it was torn down to make a Walmart that never turned into a Walmart. There's still one near my mom's house. I'm 500 miles away from that now, that has about 4 screens and still seems to be doing well.
Yeah, there are a couple. So there was one in Nashville where I lived until recently. And I actually went there the only time I went out to see a movie during COVID was at the drive-in because, that was the only sort of reasonably safe way to do it. To see The Rental and She Dies Tomorrow.
Oh, The Rental is the one with that was made by Dave Franco, right?
Yes. Yep.
I like that cast. That movie is shit.
Yeah, it was the final twist I kind of enjoyed, but for the most part, I also liked a lot of the talk around the people who were responsible for making it was a lot of elevated horror nonsense that I just kind of can't stand because I'm just a really big drive-in, genre film. And when famous people and A-listers are well, I'm making a horror movie, but I'm not lowering myself. I'm elevating the genre. I just kind of go fuck you. Fuck off. Also, this movie isn't even that good.
Yeah, no, the movie Superhost is basically the same premise as The Rental, and it's way more enjoyable. Plus, it has Barbara Crampton in it. So, come on.
Yeah, and I remember seeing the trailer for that and being that looks like The Rental, but maybe better. And I still actually haven't watched it, even though it's on Shudder. But She Dies Tomorrow was way more weird and out there and fun. But anyways, that place did a lot of revival screenings and stuff like that. The drive-ins that are around me now in Milwaukee, there are a couple that are 2 counties or so away, and they mostly show not the kind of movies which actually is one of the notes I took about this movie, which I've been jumping ahead a little bit, I guess. But she talks about how her granddad only wanted to show nice family friendly movies, and those aren't drive-in movies.
Yeah. Well, it's my local drive-through growing up, or drive-in rather, would show generally first-run movies that were kind of popular for the most part. So it'd be like, they'd show Roger Rabbit and then some less popular one and attach it as a double feature.
Yeah, that's the traditional drive-in model of the double feature. But I mean, like if you're a fan of Joe Bob Briggs, like the drive-in mutant oath is, we believe in blood, breasts, and beasts. So, it's not, that struck me, especially in this era, right? When anybody who was doing drive-in stuff was either showing first run movies of any kind, or they were showing the kind of movies you associate with the drive-in, which is exploitation, type films. And it's weird that that's a plot point of like, no, Granddad only wanted, but it's also immediately dismissed. Like our lead character doesn't struggle with like, oh, I want to like respect my grandfather, but I need to save, like, I can't save the drive-in unless I show sleaze. So I guess I'm going to have, like, sorry, Granddad. There's no struggle at all. Like basically like the boyfriend is like, we're going to show Hollywood chainsaw hookers, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And she just kind of like, for a second goes like, oh, but Granddad didn't want to do that. And then they're like, well, he's not here. And she's like, okay.
Another, continuity here. They were showing low budget sleaze in that scene before that too. They were showing like an alien crash landing in the swamp movie beforehand anyway. So it wasn't
Gator Babes. I can't believe you didn't remember the title of that
Gator
movie.
Babes.
No, Gator Babes is later. Yeah, Gator Babes is later.
Anyway, we'll talk about Gator Babes and all that stuff later. But anyway, let's get back to the plot of the movie. So I think, what's next? Do we introduce our villain?
What's next? We introduce our villain next. Our villain's name is Mr. Winston. He's a property mogul. He has been snapping up nearby properties with the goal of building a super mall. And the only property that is left to scoop up that he very much needs is this drive-in. And he's so close he can taste it. But his plans have been foiled because the former owner has given the drive-in to Kim. So he sets two goons on the case. So two goons named Carl and Harry. They're essentially Donald Trump's sons. One's dumb, one's ruthless. And his own son, Mr. Winston's son's name is Brian. So they're on the case.
So I immediately recognized Carl. And I was like, where do I know this dude from? And I looked up his IMDb page. That actor has been in so many things. And it's like a pretty even keel split between like random TV appearances in the 80s and 90s. And then like exploitation movies, like a lot of Fred Olen Ray stuff, and doing voices for anime. So much anime.
So many. Yeah, so that's Peter Spellos. We saw him before. He was who you called fake Orson Welles in Billy Frankenstein. And the plot of Billy Frankenstein is also evil businessman wants to build a mall in our hero's inherited location. And then the other guy is Ross Hagen, who shows up in a lot of these. He was in Alienator. He was the alien with the raspy voice the entire time, who we think might be the protagonist, but turns out to be the villain in the end.
Spoilers, I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, man. He doesn't ever actually seem like a hero.
Okay.
And then playing our big bad Winston, David Friedman, who was the producer of Herschel Gordon Lewis's Blood trilogy. He is the guy who produced Blood Feast, and he produced 2000 Maniacs and their sequels. Like, he has got a list of exploitation credits a mile long.
2001 Maniacs?
2001 Maniacs actually exists and was produced by him, yeah. But it was made like 30 years after the fact.
So here's a wild thing about Ross Hagen, looking at his IMDb page. He's got like you said, a list of exploitation cheap movies a mile long. And the last thing he did before he died was he was a voice in Red Dead Redemption.
Like, ended on a high note. Peter Spellos just died in November, too. So.
Oh.
No, pour one out for one of the dads in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6.
The real apex of the Nightmare on Elm Street series is 6, right?
All right, so the goons and Brian are on the case, but we have to cut back to Kim and Carrie and their boyfriends. They all head to, I think, Kim's home. They're just going to hang out all night because it's the beginning of summer vacation. And again, we don't have summer school. So specifically what I'm nailing home here is the movie hasn't told me that these girls are of legal age. They've alluded to summer vacation and summer school and not having jobs. That's all that they have told me officially. So
you're worried about the morality of this movie right now?
Well, I'm a little worried about the legality of the movie. Anyhow, so they're hanging out on the couch, and Kim and Daryl starts to get into a little bit of a tiff. Kim wants to try and save the drive-in. Daryl has better things to do with his summer vacation. And Carrie and Bobby, they sense the rising tension, and they're like, we're gonna go hang out in the hot tub. And they then proceed to fuck for several minutes in the hot tub with like dozens of lit candles all around the hot tub. So Carrie and Bobby, neither of whom live in the home, are having sex in Kim's parents' hot tub with a bunch of lit candles, and they're not practicing fire safety whatsoever.
No fire safety or safe sex.
Anytime that I was in college and had sex in a friend's bathroom, I definitely did not take the time to light candles.
I think when you're a teenager having sex, an elaborate plan really is the best.
Actually,
best situation.
So we still don't know that they're college students yet, right? Because they haven't mentioned the sorority yet. Okay,
that's in like two scenes.
Right. They get a sorority. Yeah.
So I just based on the age of the blonde-haired boyfriend with the retreating
Daryl,
hairline, I did not think that they were supposed to be high schoolers. But the whole thing was very strange because it was like, okay, our friends are fighting. So we're going to go bone in her bathtub.
Her parents' bathtub.
Presumably.
Kim doesn't have a job. She can't afford that house.
Maybe she owns her own place, like the teenage girl in the Garbage Pail Kids movie.
I saw that in a theater not that long ago, too. And my God, that movie is so awful.
Well, and that girl is like 16 years old, and there are like crotch shots of that movie. Like, it's so sleazy, man.
Also, she's supposed to be like the love interest, and she's just an asshole through the whole movie. Like, I'd forgotten that. Like, I'd seen that movie when I was a kid, and I'd forgotten most of the things about it. Yeah. And sitting through it at a midnight screening without knowing what the movie was before I went, which is why I went. My fault, I know. If you go to see a midnight movie on April Fool's Day and they don't tell you what the movie is, you deserve whatever you get. Having done that twice, I've seen Mac and Me on 35 millimeter.
We just watched that.
That movie sucks so bad. That might be the worst movie I've ever seen in a theater. And the same theater showed Samurai Cop, and I went to see that. Samurai Cop is at least funny. Mac and Me it's just boring, honestly. Like
when those aliens get naturalized to become American citizens, it is the funniest.
Last 30 seconds are hilarious, but the 90 minutes you spend with it before those 30 seconds are not worth it for the joke. I don't think.
McDonald's dancing. I mean, it's wall-to-wall killer right there. Anyway, we haven't even gotten to the plot of this movie yet.
One of the redeeming features of this movie for me, despite the glaring problem of setting the girls up as potential high schoolers and not rectifying that until several sex scenes in, was they have some really good one-line zingers. Like, Kim and Daryl break up as Carrie and Bobby are fucking, and Kim yells in frustration, "I gave you the best 3 months of my life."
That's pretty good, yeah.
Legitimately the best line in the movie, I think. Yeah, I gave you the best 3 months of my life. Absolutely. Oh, also, I took a couple of important notes that we did sort of gloss over. So I do have to say, it was at the 6-minute mark that we first saw titties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was about the 15-minute mark when we got the first sex scene, which we also haven't really elaborated on. But like I said before, I'm not sure these actors have ever actually had sex, because the way that they perform sex is so not erotic or stimulating or I mean, look, like I said earlier, I watched a lot of these movies as a teenager, and as as a teenage boy attracted to women, like, this absolutely would have done it for me. As a grown ass adult who has had sex with people before, I am just mystified that anyone involved in this was like, yes, the cut, print, perfect. That was great.
Well, and it was shot by Gary Graver, who shoots a lot of the Fred Olin Ray stuff we watch. And he's directed legitimate porns and all sorts of stuff, like hundreds of these things. And still, it is so boring. It is so flat and even, and there's no like sexy lighting or anything.
Well, and the dude just has this expression on his face like he's doing his taxes. Like, he looks bored. Again, if you're supposed to be a college student in like your ostensibly rich friends, which is also the weird thing. It's like they talk about needing money to save the drive-in, and it's like your parents seem to live in, based on the notes in on IMDb, I'm going to say it looks like your parents live in David Carradine's house. Because apparently some of this movie was shot in David Carradine's house at the time.
Yeah, there were equal parts shot in Fred Olin Ray's house, and I know for certain that the Goliath scene towards the end of the movie was shot in David Carradine's backyard.
So wait, do we think that this is Fred Olin Ray's hot tub?
It could be Fred Olin Ray's. It could be David Carradine's.
Well, sure. Yeah, I guess it could be Fred Olin Ray's house too. But my point is, how are you having trouble scraping up money to pay the bank back when your parents live in a house that has a bathtub like that?
Exactly.
But yeah, they just look utterly... Well, sorry, the guy, for sure, looks utterly disinterested in what he's doing. And she is just making movements and gestures that do not compute for me whatsoever.
As an informed sex haver?
Yes, as a person who has now been married for however, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I'm like, what is even going on here? Like, as I alluded to before, there are moments where like they're in what you would generously call a sexual position, but neither of their hips are thrusting. So I don't know, like, we're just hanging out in there, just chilling.
Maybe it's like maybe you're not allowed to move so much without being completely X-rated. I'm not really sure. Maybe
but most of these films are not rated. Oh, this is R, actually. This does say it has an R rating. I was going to say I feel like a lot of these movies that went straight to Cinemax or whatever are just not submitted to the ratings board. So
yeah, who knows? Maybe you get in trouble with the FCC.
This is a movie that I think when I was a teenager, at the beginning, before they sort of showed it on Cinemax, it would have had the SSC, strong sexual content descriptor, which is what you were always looking for as a teenage boy, channel surfing late at night. If you could pull the SSC, that was exactly what you want. The N for nudity you could get in a lot of movies. The SSC is what you were really looking for.
Okay, so we've basically alluded to the plot of the movie now because we're talking about the taxes. And basically they have a big tax bill that is due by... Monday.
Mm-hmm. We're on Friday. The bill is due on Monday.
So what we have to do is we have to do a White Christmas, a Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo, Muppets, Blues Brothers, put on a big show and save the whole thing. Except instead of musical numbers in this movie, we have sex scenes. Like, it's pretty much that, right?
I literally took a note that said the plots for softcore pornography and kids' movies are identical, and all that is different is like the finer points of them, but in broad strokes. Also, like, I find it weird that in the 90s we loved the evil land developer as a villain, and I feel like evil land developers in real life are doing so much more damage now, and they've basically disappeared as antagonists in films, which I find very strange.
Because they're the ones paying for the movies now.
That's true.
Yeah, I guess.
They've got real money and real power these days.
You can't make people buying up giant... Like, I just read that Jeff Bezos bought like $100 million worth of single-family homes like a week ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, if you live in, I don't know, San Francisco or Washington, D.C. or wherever, and your housing prices go up even more because someone just bought a whole bunch of houses, then you know why. It's Jeff Bezos' fault.
We'll be following that story with interest. What could possibly go wrong?
At least it's not Elon Musk, question mark.
All right, so we are introduced to another few characters at this point in the movie. We have Oscar, the projectionist. He is a kind old man, loves his job, had no idea that the drive-in was in that much trouble.
Yeah, Oscar, we also have... sorry to interrupt again already, but Oscar is Conrad Brooks, who is a big Ed Wood guy. He was in basically all of the classic Ed Wood movies back in the day, so he's one of our bigger stars in this movie.
That's so cool. That's awesome. We also meet Tom and Susan. They work at the drive-in. I think Tom sells the tickets and Susan mans the concession stand. And they are lovely, sweet people. Susan is obviously very much in love with Tom, and they both are unstylish. Let's
they're both nerds. I mean, she's got glasses, so you know she's ugly, right?
She has glasses. Her hair is in like a messy bun, we would call it now, kind of. And she's dressed in a very, like, conservative manner. I could never guess what her character arc will be, if we can even call it that, in this film. Also, Tom was, like, distracting me because I feel like I'm looking at him and I'm like, is that dude... Do you all know the YouTube comedian Ryan George? He does the pitch meeting.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, that dude is Ryan George's dad. Like, he looks just like Ryan George, and I'm just waiting for him to be like, oh, yeah. Like, that's like
super
at any
easy.
moment.
Rarely an inconvenience.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. Like, okay, all right. But yeah, I didn't actually. So this is how either I was too invested in taking notes, or this movie just did not do a great job of communicating it to me. I did not get that dude was the projectionist. I thought he was just kind of like the general manager of the establishment. I did not clock that he was the projectionist. So there you go.
This film introduces so many characters because we get a Candy and a Mandy, and we get all these sorority sisters helping clean up the drive-in, and like one of them is buff as hell and doesn't show up in the rest of the movie. Like, who is that lady? Like, who are any of these ladies? And were any of the ladies cleaning up Candy and Mandy?
No, Candy and Mandy show up later. We're almost there. Let's just get there right now.
Okay, let's get there right now. Yeah.
Because this is really interesting. Okay. So together, the group of them, Oscar, Tom, Susan, Kim, Carrie, they're like, oh, what are we going to do to save the drive-in? And they're going to try and clean it up and make a bunch of money within 2 days. Easy peasy.
Lemon squeezy.
First, you got to clean up the drive-in. And they're like, how are we going to do it? It's just like the five of us. Carrie says, I'll ask my sorority sisters to come help. So this is the very first moment where we're like, oh, they're in college. It's okay to be watching them all have sexy time, even though we secretly know they're mostly middle-aged. Okay. Then the sorority sisters come, we get a cleaning montage, and this is where the bodybuilder sorority sister appears for the one montage, and then leaves. They are all adult women, like a little bit more mature than college age, in cute outfits, so nobody changed into work clothes to clean up the drive-in. And one is very obviously a bodybuilder, which is so very cool because in the mid-90s, women bodybuilding really took off. It was like hugely popular because of Arnold Schwarzenegger and then steroids and everything. And there's a documentary about this on Netflix, which I recently watched. So I was just like, there's one of them. There's a real woman bodybuilder in the wild getting a bit of, like $50 a day to show up and show her boobs and pretend to clean a wall. It's fantastic.
She's really just breaking boundaries and breaking that glass ceiling.
Right through the glass ceiling.
Women with biceps.
Sure. None of those sorority sisters had any problems with tan lines.
Everybody hates tan lines around that part of California.
Just assume it's a California thing. They all hate tan lines.
Another interesting thing is there is a moment during this montage where it's kind of a shaky cam. Somebody went in there with a handheld and got a little too excited about what was going on. But I saw in the credits that the movie was filmed during the 6.8 earthquake. So maybe that scene was during the earthquake.
Oh, the earthquake happened, according to the director's commentary, secondhand, during the car dance number towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was the big earthquake in January of 1994. It wasn't quite a 6.8, but yeah, it was in Northridge was the epicenter.
Got it. Oh, that must have been a very chilly car dance. Okay. All right, so we're going to save the drive-in. We've cleaned up the drive-in. The goons, Carl and Harry and Brian Winston, they arrive. They want to have a not-so-friendly conversation with Kim. Kim tells them to get lost. She's not giving up the drive-in theater. Mr. Winston, when he hears about this, he's like, take care of it. I want that land. Blah, 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 blah. But unbeknownst to Mr. Winston, his son, Brian, has fallen in love at first sight with Kim.
So Brian has already flopped sides, basically for no reason. And Brian is also somebody who would probably just have the money to save the drive-in, but chooses not to. Brian is an actor we just saw in our last movie.
Did we?
Yeah, that's Richard. I never know how to say his last name. Gabay. He was in Assault on VA-33. He was the head goon who had just was tired of it all. He was that guy who's like, do we have to have phases for this? Can't we just get our ransom and leave? Yeah.
So he's just 30 years older and I didn't notice.
Yeah, no. I mean, and that guy has been in a ton of Fred Olen Ray movies, a ton of B movies. Nice. He was one of the 20,000 characters in Demon Wind, if you ever saw Demon Wind. So
I did not. No.
Yeah.
Did either of you notice that during this scene when Brian and the goons and Mr. Winston are discussing that there was a low battery beep for a smoke detector going off in the background?
No. Oh my God.
Did not notice that, no.
And we're sure that wasn't in your house, right?
We rewound and watched it a couple times just to make sure we weren't hearing things.
So you were able to get your husband to watch this movie with you, huh?
Oh, get him to watch it. Sure, yes, that's how it happened.
So the most exciting poster... Okay, so there's a bunch of posters for real movies going on in this, just a ton of them.
And some real drive-in snipes are used as B-roll, too.
Yeah, so we got... She holds a poster for Cannibal Girls at one point, which is a Canadian horror movie from 1980, which is not particularly notable for many things. It's really hard to find. But it does star SCTV's Eugene Levy and Andrea Martin.
Nice.
Yeah, right before they did SCTV, they were in this low-budget horror movie. So
I was going to say, is this contemporaneous with them being on SCTV or right before? Okay.
Yeah, right before. I think SCTV started in the mid-'80s, or maybe 83.
Honestly, I thought it was earlier than that, but yeah, okay. That sounds right.
Maybe.
Yeah, a lot of the old drive-in stuff and the old snipes, and when they show I don't want to jump ahead, but when they show the trailer for the house on Hooter Hill, they show a drive-in snipe of come to the drive-in for the terrifying double feature thing, and then it's a goof, but the actual pre-roll to that of the eyes with the sort of green filter over it is an actual old school drive-in snipe, which is super cool. I don't know if kind of wonder at that time, I don't know what Fred Olen Ray's relationship with Mike Vraney would have been, but that seems that he was kind of the number one source for that stuff. It kind of still is. He's dead, but something weird is kind of they saved a lot of that stuff, and you can go to their website and buy hours and hours and hours of old drive-in snipes. So I do wonder if Fred Olen Ray just called up Mike Vraney and was like, "Hey Mike, can you hook me up with some old drive-in snipes that I can use?"
Well, we've got so many drive-in directors that'll show up later on in the movie, so I feel like there's it's such a love letter to the drive-in, and so many of these cameos that will show up later, I don't know who would recognize them because it's mostly directors, but I do have to note here, too, that House on Hooter Hill became a real movie after this. Jim Wynorski stole that title and made House on Hooter Hill.
I was going to ask, was it Dakota or Wynorski?
No, this is totally Jim Wynorski's Hills Have Thighs period and the Bear Wench Project.
I was going to say, was he responsible for the Bear Wench Project?
Yeah, anything with a pun title like that is either Jim Wynorski directed or co-directed. So, okay, so what's next in this plot, Meredith?
All right. Well, they go through one night of drive-in theater. They earn something like $20. So Kim is very dejected. What are we gonna do? She goes for a walk on the beach to clear her mind and comes across Brian. He's been waiting for her and declares his intention to help her. She's super into it. And then they have a first kiss, followed by him pulling down her top immediately and groping her, as is normal.
Yeah, that's, the first time
It's first base.
Kissed my first college girlfriend. I just immediately pulled her shirt down. Here's the weird thing about these movies to me, this kind of softcore specifically, right? Is that there's always a lot of people fucking, but it's always within this really the politics of these movies confuses me, right? Because especially this movie has there's a comment about political correctness, which is a very mid-90s just throwaway line. I'm not going to read too much into that, but it's there's this whole segment about we're not communist. You think we're communists? We're not communists. We're just trying to have a good time. We want to be free and naked and smoke dope and watch schlocky movies and all that. And I'm but then these type of movies, including this one, all of the sex is within the trappings of these super heteronormative monogamous relationships where it's like, even though we make sure that she breaks up with her receding hairline boyfriend first, and I don't know, people aren't going to see me, but I want everybody to understand that, like, I am a balding man, so I can talk shit about his receding hairline. I shave my head because I'm going bald, which is what that dude should have done, for the record. But anyway, like, we make sure that she breaks up with the dude, and then she, like, there's like this half-assed Cliff's Notes romance between her and the neck. Like, she can't just want to fuck this dude for sport. There has to be some tiny semblance of a relationship to hang your hat on before they go fucking, I guess it was ostensibly her bed.
Yep.
Because of course, like, we cut out any journey back to whatever house or wherever this is taking place. We don't need that shit.
It's strange. Fred Olen Ray's movies tend to be surprisingly earnest, and it does, promote this like heteronormative stuff, but it's also like there's a lack of cynicism in so many of these movies that it's just odd to me. So many movies you'll watch and they'll like despise humanity, but he's kind of rooting for all these weirdos and underdogs constantly, and he doesn't really villainize anybody. Like, even the villain of this movie at the end is just like, oh, well, I guess that's okay.
That is sort of like a deeply unsatisfying denouement, though. It's just like the villain decides to give up.
My God, yes.
Yeah, it's just weird to me, right? It's just like there's this also, like, I say heteronormative, but I actually have a note later on that we'll talk about that is like there are exceptions to the heteronormativity of these kinds of movies and this movie in particular. But I mean, I agree, right? There is definitely like a weird brand of like, non-cynical wholesomeness to it, but it also just like in scenes like this, it rings completely hollow, right? Because it's literally like, I like you. It's like the high school, like, I like you too. And then immediately goes into like, I mean, it's a softcore movie, but like they're fucking like immediately. And it's like, okay, that's sure. But like, why do we feel like we have to create this thing of like, oh no, this is like, there's some level of emotional connection and monogamy implied. And like, they're going to be dating now rather than just like, yo, give me that dick, right? Like, that's just, we have to do that for some reason. And
no one here is a slut. They just like having sex.
Right. Right. No one here is a slut. They're just serial monogamists. I mean, she gave that last guy the best 3 months of her life, so.
So there you go. Yeah, that's a long relationship.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a boring sex scene, and then Brian talks to Oscar, who is held on to all the trashy movies, and Brian gets the idea of let's show trashy movies.
Yes.
So we have a mix of fake trashy movies and real ones, right?
Yeah.
I'm not imagining that. Like, several of those are not real movies.
Yeah, they get the idea of doing, I forget what, Michelle Bauer, they say triple feature, and then they turn it into quadruple feature.
Quadruple.
And they pull out 4 movies, 3 of which are fake, and the real one is Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. It's like... I Was a Teenage Tree. Just very silly.
But they're also like kind of they're referential to real like low budget B movies and exploitation films of like the 50s and 60s. It's like, okay. Mm-hmm. Also, the production company, we didn't mention this at the very beginning. The production company is AIP, but it's not that AIP. It's a different AIP.
AIP.
But they're very clearly, they're trading on Roger Corman's good name, but it is not that AIP. It's American Independent Pictures or American Independent
not American
Productions
International Pictures.
Right. They at one point they say there's the something of Yucca Flat, which is a play on the Beast of Yucca Flats, and there's like a lot of these are like, oh, that's a reference to I Was a Teenage Frankenstein or I Was a Teenage Werewolf, Beast of Yucca Flats, the Creature from 40,000 Fathoms. Like, a lot of them are like almost those titles, but like not quite. And then, like you said, Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. And the dude is like, I love that movie. And is he in that movie? Because I was like, it would be even funnier if he's in that movie. I don't
think we watched that one as our first movie, and I don't think he was in that. I think he was just talking to Fred Olen Ray and just, it was a line in the movie. Okay, so since we've said Beast of Yucca Flats a couple of times and all these movies, I should mention that in the big drive-in scene where they're all watching the thing in the end, we do have Anthony Cardoza show up, who was the director of Beast of Yucca Flats and Red Zone Cuba and a lot of the Mystery Science Theater fare. And he is in the car with David Hewitt, who made shit like Dr. Terror's Gallery of Horrors and The Mighty Gorga, which is like the world's cheapest killer monkey movie that you've never seen. And they threw in a couple of other ones too, but we can talk about that later. But I just wanted, since we already mentioned the Beast of Yucca Flats, I'm like, okay, well, we've got to say that guy shows up later.
That makes so much sense because it contextualizes and gives a reason for all these otherwise random in-car scenes as the people have come to the drive-in to see their movies.
Yeah, all those people are cameos of people.
Yeah.
Like, one guy is probably the most recognizable out of all those. We're just going to jump ahead. Fuck it. Why not?
Yeah, we're there. It's fine.
Is that guy Forrest Ackerman?
That is Forey Ackerman himself, yeah, of Famous Monsters of Filmland. He's the guy with the insect repellent, if you don't know who he looks like, what he looks like.
It's if you watch old drive-ins, like if you're a weirdo like me who like puts on old drive-in snipes as like background noise, they always advertise those at drive-ins, and I think they probably still do because they still make that stuff. And it's basically like it's a coil. It's like a Dreamcast. It's like a green Dreamcast logo.
Yeah, it's like a green spiral. Yeah.
Yeah, and you light one end of it, and it's mosquito repellent incense, and it's really kind of harsh. Like the gag is they open it, they light it in the car, and then they have to like evacuate the car because it's full of really harsh smoke, that is what will happen if you do it inside. But it does work. It keeps bugs away because it's really unpleasant. But I don't really like using it because sitting near it is also like unpleasant for people. Like it's also like a person repellent as much as it is a bug repellent. But they do still make it and sell it, and it does work. So.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess if you don't know who Forrest J. Ackerman is, yeah, he ran the Famous Monsters magazine for years. He was one of the first big horror collectors, and is just
Awesome.
like one of those guys. Him and like Bob Burns are probably like the two most famous horror collector guys that weren't as much a part of making the movies as just kind of like, you know, memorializing the movies.
Yeah, super early like enthusiast press. Like Famous Monsters of Filmland is like even more, and like I mean I think that probably stuff like Starlog and Fangoria counts as enthusiast press too, but like Famous Monsters of Filmland is like if a fanzine, like a horror fanzine, got elevated to like being an actual, you know, full blown like money making publication, as opposed to something like Fangoria, which they actually would like go to sets and interview people and like break news about movies that were being made or being greenlit or being like and like Famous Monsters of Filmland is more just like, hey, this thing is cool. Someone wrote about this thing that they think is cool.
And they'd be like, somebody asked us to run this photo from Bride of Frankenstein again, so we're going to run that again. And they're like, no one asked you for that. You just, you know, needed to fill up an extra page. No, Fangoria is more like the People magazine of monster movies and shit like that.
Right. Or it was. I don't know if it's, I mean, now I think it's a little closer to, well, Fangoria, I think you can still do a physical subscription to Fangoria. It's like a Patreon type of thing. Oh. It's like not a big thing, but it's the editor-in-chief, at least for a long time, was Phil Nobile, who's formerly one of the editors of Badass Digest / Birth Movies Death, which, like, if there's one thing that I think it was part of their restructuring, I guess, probably because they did like touch on bankruptcy during COVID, but like I legitimately loved Badass Digest / Birth Movies Death, and I'm so like that was every time I went to the Alamo in DC, like I would always make sure to grab the latest copy because it was free at the Draft House, and that's just such a bummer that magazine doesn't exist. But Phil Nobile, who actually sat next to during a screening of three mystery horror movies at the Alamo Draft House in DC, and didn't realize it was him until after I left the movie. Oh. I was riding the metro back home, and I was looking at my Twitter. And I followed him on Twitter, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I was just talking to the guy next to me about Friday the 13th and blah blah blah." I'm like, that's me. I just had that conversation. But I think he's still the editor-in-chief of the current version of Fangoria, and Darcy the Mail Girl writes a monthly column, which is again Joe Bob Briggs'
right.
Current Mail Girl writes like a monthly column for Fangoria, so it's still kicking around. Which also I think Famous Monsters of Filmland is also technically still kicking around. I mean, I think Forrest Ackerman is dead now.
Yeah, I think he died a couple of years ago.
Anyways,
back to the movie. In addition to having our, Michelle Bauer quadruple feature, we also want to get Michelle Bauer in this movie.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So what is our hero's plan to get her in this movie?
So Brian is a business person, I guess, and he knows that in order to attract patrons to the drive-in, you have to have more than just blood and gore on the screen. You gotta have sexy babes. And even better if you can get a legendary scream queen, the character's name is Diane Lynn, to show up. So he calls her up and gives some fibs. He says, okay, it's tonight. We're gonna send a car around, pick you up at whatever o'clock. And she's like, what's tonight? And he just straight up lies. He's like, my people called your people. We have you on, like, confirmed for showing up at this quadruple feature, blah, blah, blah. We're going to be showing some, like, movies, and everybody's looking forward to you showing up, including the President of the United States of America. So Diane is like, oh, well, okay, great. Looks like there was a little communication mishap, but all I've been doing is swimming topless in my pool, so...
And
let's go.
Getting oil massages from my Chippendale butler.
Yeah, the most cut dude you've ever seen, rubbing her down with oil. That guy only has a couple of credits, but I think most of them are David Dakota films. I know, shock of shock.
Of course.
And I think Michelle Bauer is funny in this. I think she's, like, every movie we've seen her in, she's pretty funny. And I am genuinely shocked that we did not have a Bill Clinton impersonator in this movie, because that's what the WWF would have done. And
that is 100% what the WWF would have done, and mercifully we're spared that indignity. But I do have to say, if we're talking about wrestling, it's the second scene when the Chippendale butler comes back, I was like, he's 15 years too early to be one of Dalton Castle's boys. She's picking out an outfit and he's like holding her outfits and trying to show them. He's wearing like a feather boa and like he puts on her like little feather, it's sort of technically a hat, I guess, but it's like a little feather headdress. Yeah. And I'm like, he looks like one of Dalton. This is a reference that may go over a whole bunch of people's heads, but he looks like one of Dalton Castle's boys in that moment, which is just delightful.
Too old for that and too young to be, was it the Fantastics who wore the Chippendale outfits to the ring?
Yes. One of the Fantastics is allegedly the father of current Congress critter Lauren Boebert.
He took a DNA test to prove that he was not the father of a congressperson. If you can,
did he really?
That. Yes, I believe
didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well,
this is how Congress has turned into professional wrestling.
Yes, yeah. But also, I'm sorry. I just saw one of my notes and I need to rewind for just a second because I need to see if anybody else caught it and had the same read on it as I did. The first time she bangs land developer's son. Mm-hmm. Which, like, if the land developer's son had, like, impure intentions and was just trying to, like, it was in league with his father, she's taken in so fast he could have... Anyways.
Everybody's taken at face value in this movie, and they are all, like, being honest all the time.
Yes,
so.
You're right. Like you said, there's no cynicism in this film at all, but there's a moment where they interlink fingers and tug on the sheets, and I'm like, was that a Terminator homage?
It could have been.
Oh, man. I don't know. I mean, Fred Olen Ray references movies like most of us breathe air, so...
This is kind of why I was like, that's a weirdly specific detail for them to, like, lace their fingers together in that way and tug on the sheets in that exact way that I was like...
Yeah.
I've seen The Terminator enough times to recognize that particular gesture, and that feels like that is... pointing directly at the Terminator for some reason. I don't really know why, but, you know.
I trust your gut.
Yeah, I would.
That shot came at the end of a very long, dull sex scene.
Yes.
So it's there on purpose.
With very little hip movement, once again.
Yeah.
Is this where Candy and Mandy show up, I believe?
Oh, right, Candy and Mandy.
Okay, so I have just like a nitpick, linguistic problem that I need to present to you all and see if, you know, we're all on the same page here. This is one of two very important linguistic nitpicks that I have. Candy and Mandy are wearing lingerie, not bikinis.
Yeah, what the hell?
That is true.
This is bullshit. And later on... I'll just get both my linguistic concerns out of the way. Yeah. So, like, later on, I know you people who maybe have not seen this movie and are listening to this, you may be shocked to know that the bookish librarian girl who works at the snack bar later becomes, like a dick-hungry, you know, vixen. And she is wearing a one-piece bathing suit, which also... Not a bikini.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, I mean, just, I don't know. I don't know who to trust anymore. We said that Fred Olen Ray was being earnest, but he's lying to us about the Bikini Drive-In. It's a bikini / general bathing suit / lingerie / totally nude drive-in.
Oh, right. Yeah, there's totally nude stuff going on, too. Jesus.
That's true. Also, one of them's in a monster costume.
Yeah, I was actually, so this goes back to the heteronormative thing I was talking about earlier, and I was like, it is bogus that we don't see Ted in a banana hammock.
He should have been in that. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, I want Ted to don the grape smugglers, instead of... There is actually a plot reason. As much as anything in this movie has a plot reason, there is a plot reason why he wears a rubber monster outfit, so...
Yeah.
Well, the sexy reason for Candy and Mandy is extra advertising. One of them heads to the local DJ and exchanges a lap dance, essentially, for some free advertising to get customers in the drive-in.
So our local DJ is Randy Rocket. Do you know who that is?
A bad stage name?
It is our director, Fred Olen Ray, is the DJ in this movie.
That's who that is? Okay, I did not know that.
That's Fred Olen Ray.
I have never looked him up. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's why he's credited as, I think, either question mark or himself in the end credits.
It was question mark, yeah.
Yeah, so there's Candy and then there's Mandy. And which one dances for the DJ? Is that Candy? I think that's Candy, and I think Mandy is the one that dances for the car.
Yeah. So we get a striptease from each of them, just at different times. They have slightly different hairstyles. So
Candy is Becky LeBeau. And she actually sings half the songs in the soundtrack. Like, the soundtrack is songs by Becky LeBeau, and Richard Goodbye sings the other songs. So they provide most of this, like, underwhelming soundtrack to the movie. Yeah, and then Mandy is an actor named, like, Tane McClure or something like that. I can't remember. But her big claim to fame is that she played Elle Woods' mom in Legally Blonde. She only has, like, one line. Something about, like, why are you going to law school? You just got first runner-up in the Miss Hawaiian Tropics. Are you going to give all that up?
That's a big deal. That movie was huge.
Yeah. So we're basically at the big drive-in finale now.
I was going to say,
right?
I think we got to the... Because we just got Randy Rocket of K-Ass Radio.
That's right.
K-A-S-S, Kick-Ass Radio. And, sorry, was that Fred Olen Ray's real mullet, or was that, like, a wig?
I think that was his real mullet at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Incredible.
It's a beautiful thing on a man or a woman, the mullet haircut.
Yeah. Also, I think, like, this, like, I understand what kind of movie I'm watching, but I do always think it's funny when it's like, oh, the bookish, nerdy girl, like, puts on the bikini and she has gigantic fake breasts.
Not since Evil Tunes, when Monique Gabriel takes off her shirt to stare at her own giant tits in the mirror, have we had a scene like this. They're so big. She might be the most attractive woman in the movie. I don't really know, but
are you sure? She was wearing glasses.
I mean, she was a little too tan for me, but other than that, like, I don't know, man.
Wait. Did she have tan lines? Do you remember?
I don't think she had tan lines either.
I don't think she does. But actually, I'm afraid that you are incorrect. The most attractive woman in the movie is the one wearing the Napalm Death shirt who kicks the dude in the nuts.
That was...
oh, yeah, that was great.
So we have a dude wearing the monster suit, which was not
Tom was wearing the monster suit.
Yeah, Tom was wearing the monster suit, but it was really Christopher Olen Ray wearing the monster suit, which is the same monster suit he was wearing when he was 7 years old for Biohazard. It was a John Carl Buechler design that they just had laying around still, so adding production value to have this nice monster suit.
John Carl Buechler made a monster suit for a Fred Olen. I mean, everybody starts somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he made Ghoulies movies. He doesn't really,
Yes, that's true.
He's not too hot.
It was a really good suit.
It was a good song. I mean, you got to reuse it too.
I mean, he directed a Friday the 13th. Only 12 people can lay claim to that. So that might have been Steve Miner might have done 2 and 3. So the 11 people can lay claim. But John Carl Buechler is one of them, and his Friday the 13th movie is also the one with like some of the best effects because he got like really into it. Of course, the MPAA cut all of it to shit, so you don't get to see a lot of the good stuff. But
that was 7, right? With the Jason Fights Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
which is why Jason looks the cool. That's say what you will about that movie. I actually think that's one of the more underrated. That's the one that actually tries something a little different. But whatever you say about that movie, Jason looks the coolest he's ever looked in that movie. That is the best Jason design, for sure.
I honestly have love for all the Jason movies. I even am an apologist for 5, so I'm for it, you know.
I mean, I love them all to varying degrees. I think
one is the most boring.
One is probably the most boring. And it's also the one that I feel like has gotten the most revivals. Like, I've seen that one in a theater like 3 times in the last year, and I'm like, show a different one, please. Like, I'm begging you to show part 6 or part 4 or part
Show the Tommy
8.
Jarvis trilogy and just be
Show
done
this
with it.
just right. Show me the Tommy Jarvis trilogy. But I do think it's funny that Carl Buechler got the best Jason design, and then in the movie after that you get the absolute dirt worst, laziest, shittiest Jason design in part 8. So
when he takes Manhattan and then he turns into a little baby for no reason,
and he turns into a
Anyway, so we're at the drive-in.
So we're at the drive-in and we set our evening up for success. So step 1 is Brian hands out the bikinis or the one piece, as we've already discussed.
Yes.
He delivers the monster suit to our character, Tom. So everybody changes clothes. They are in bikinis except for Brian, who's wearing his regular clothes. Candy and Mandy are dancing on the marquee. So that causes a couple of car accidents. People are throwing their money. I think we have some sorority sisters collecting ticket money. One of them, I really did not like this. I screamed and Frank was launched out of his reverie. Is what's wrong? One of the ticket sellers collected the dollar bill with her mouth and paper money is
absolutely disgusting.
But it probably has cocaine traces on it, so at least there's that.
I have such a visceral reaction. I was like, oh, hell no.
So if it makes you feel better, this is a low budget movie, so this might not apply here, but I'm going to go with this, so hopefully it makes you feel better.
Yes.
So I've been in a number of films ranging from movies made with literally no money to movies that were made with a bunch of money that had Johnny Depp and Christian Bale in them. I peed next to Christian Bale once. No, I didn't look. Don't even ask. That's
I assume he yelled at you.
No, actually, it was right when that happened too, because So it was Terminator and Public Enemies were made back to back. So it was right around the time that stuff was coming out. He was totally chill on the set that I was on for Public Enemies, Michael Mann for him. But being on the set of Public Enemies, I can tell you that usually the money that they use on film sets is fake money that looks close enough from a distance. And so probably she didn't put in circulation money in her mouth, hopefully.
Thank goodness.
She also collects an admission fee with her ass cheeks at one point.
Yes, she does.
So this was another note that I took.
You got ass cheek notes.
Not just that, but just in general, the sorority girls who are taking the admission are really going for it. But also, if you have a big line going out into the highway, that is not an efficient way to deal with that. You can't roll over everybody's car with your tits out. You just you could put your boobs in there and let them squeeze the money between your tits, and then you got to throw the ticket at them and get them down the line because you got to get more people inside. Because actually, that was an interesting comment they made earlier. And the movie was we make $50 a week, and it's mostly concessions. It's yes, literally every movie theater, basically since the beginning of cinema, as we understand it, it has been basically that's how they make their money. They pay so much money to exhibit the films that all of the money. That's why concessions are so expensive, because the margins are gigantic. So it's always basically concessions, but you need to get them in there so that they can start buying popcorn.
And
candy, because they get the candy.
They get the candy, yeah. They have basically a golden ticket in one of the candy bars that you win a free car dance, and people are buying 40 pieces of candy, not knowing what a car dance is.
What if Willy Wonka, but horny?
Yeah.
So this is the part where the heteronormativity goes out the window.
Yes.
Everybody wants a car dance from Mandy.
Yeah.
Men and women, and I assume non-binary people as well, all want the car dance from Mandy. And that is the only time in a movie like this, of this era, where it is acceptable to be queer, is if you are a woman who is thirsty for other women, in addition to being thirsty for men. Because you can't just be a lesbian, you have to be bisexual, and pansexual wasn't a thing that I don't think people really said at the time, but you have to be bisexual or pansexual. You cannot be a lesbian you have to be interested in men because we all know like who these movies are for, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, you're allowed to be queer in a movie like this if you are a bisexual woman, and that's it. Or you're like the butt of a joke. If you're the butt of you can be a gay male. There are none, and thankfully there are none in this movie. But you are allowed to be a gay male character if you're the butt of a joke in a movie like this.
We don't get a lot of like queer panic in the Fred Olen Ray movies we've watched so far, which is kind of shocking since we've watched so many movies from the 80s and 90s.
Is it? And this is me just like pontificating because I know, how things go in Hollywood and how they went in Hollywood back in the day. Like, is it possible that he is a closeted homosexual man? Is that?
I mean, it's possible. He has a couple of wives, and it's certainly not beyond the scope to have a gay person direct these skin flicks, as we've mentioned Dave Dakota a number of times. Yeah,
David Dakota is gay, is an openly gay man.
No, it doesn't seem to be that way. I don't know. It's just something to keep an eye on.
Probably not. Maybe he was just. I mean, again, I don't know really anything about him as a person other than he's directed a bunch of schlock. Yeah. It's definitely possible that he's just like that. The earnestness he puts into these weird, cheap exploitation movies is like the same. Like that's just the kind of person he is. So he wouldn't want to take like a cheap shot at gay men that way. That a lot of movies in the 90s like that's. There's some stuff, I mean, like, which is also weird because there's also like really great sort of nascent queer cinema happening in the 90s that is like, these are like Greg Araki movies, which are like delightfully weird and also like cornerstones of queer cinema in the 90s and just like super fun, weird, bizarre movies.
But the mainstream stuff, like half of every Friends episode has, oh no, somebody might think we're gay.
Right.
So. But we don't get that here,
but we don't get any of that here. But yeah, so the women wanting a dance from Mandy is okay, as long as they also... actually, you know what? I will say, for a softcore porn movie of this era, again, I will say that I was actually surprised by the number of moments of men performing oral sex on women.
Oh yeah, movie. Totally. That does, we do. I mean, we cut to like 5 different shots for every sex scene, and like half the time we do get a cunnilingus shot going on there. Okay, so Mandy's dancing for this car, and previous to this, Tom is
piles of candy in the windshield.
They bought all this candy just to win the golden ticket. Tom has been knocked out, and Peter Spellos has put on the monster suit, even though there is no way he would fit in that monster suit. Like, Peter Spellos is a big guy, and this monster suit is smaller than he is right now. So he goes and ends up getting the crap beat out of him by Mandy for some reason.
He does grab her. He grabs her uninvitedly by the leg, and she then proceeds to light him on fire, which is probably a bit of a reaction. Also, I took a note of this joke. I've been saving this joke. I'm actually pretty proud of this one. I was waiting for a movie to bring to me a woman doing a striptease with a public domain Don Quixote cartoon projected on her, which to me says that clearly she is titting at windmills.
Woo!
Thank you.
Beautiful. That is beautiful.
Thank you.
I will also point out that there is another continuity error here where Mandy is completely topless, goes and attacks Carl, and then in the next shot she's got her top back on and tied on. So that is a super obvious continuity error, and the only thing I can think of is that... there are 2 things that I can think of. The actress was so as a non-breast haver, I guess I can't speak to this for certain. Yeah, you don't want to swing your arms with the
right. The actress was like physically did it like once and was like, that hurt. Can I put my top back on? Or the MPAA saw like the wild swinging of titties while she was punching this thing in the face, and they were like, no, you cannot. We cannot have tit movement that violent in this movie. You have to reshoot that with her top on. Those are the 2 possibilities that spring to my mind.
Those are good points. And I was trying to think, like, as a breast haver, like, what is the more likely scenario, but I cannot say that I have ever
toplessly attacked a monster?
Right, well, I've never attacked anybody or like really done vigorous exercise without a bra on, so like maybe it does hurt. I don't know.
There is the chance that the earthquake happened and halted production.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The earthquake.
Yeah, because the earthquake happened in the middle of the car dance scene.
Of this scene, when they were shooting the scene. That's right.
That must have been so scary. You're on top of a car and you're like, oh, look, I'm dancing. And then everything's shaking. Oh, my God.
I am so sad this isn't a video podcast because I love your dancing right there. Like,
I'm super sexy.
Yeah, exactly. So this is probably my favorite part of the movie, not the car dance, but all of these like fake trailers, and you get all these like meta joke trailers, and there's actually a little bit of production value here because so much stuff is recycled.
Well, also they were apparently going to the guy who shot the B-roll for Gator.
Steve Latshaw, was
going to make that into a full movie and didn't get around to it.
Basically, his teaser trailer to try to entice producers to put money in Gator Babes.
Oh, that's smart.
And then they show clips from that same director, his movie Dark Universe, which I think is the one with the crash-landed spaceship. Or they show earlier on, they cut to other scenes of that there. Then we have a trailer for Goliath and the Cheerleaders, which is that's the one that is filmed at David Carradine's backyard.
Mitchell. Yeah.
And that's Gordon Mitchell, who, if you don't know, is basically... Is it fair to call him the poor man Steve Reeves?
He's 100% the poor man Steve Reeves.
Yeah, he's a muscle man who went to Italy to make movies in the vein of Steve Reeves' Hercules movies.
The meta joke of filmed in Italy where it really happened is just like, like
that is beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful. Like that, all of this stuff is the best part of the movie for me as like a genre film person. Like the fake drive-in trailers and those jokes, like all that stuff lands with me in a way that really nothing else this movie does.
Yeah, one of the other Diane Lane movies is footage from Evil Spawn, which had like 3 directors on it, and Fred Olen Ray was one of those directors as well. We also got, I don't know what they called the movie then, but we have a giant Michelle Bauer at one point where she's like...
Was that Attack of the 50-Foot Centerfold? Or that movie hadn't been made yet.
It kind of is. So Fred Olen Ray went to Roger Corman to saying, hey, I want to make Attack of the 60-Foot Centerfold. And he said, okay, well, show me some test footage. And Fred Olen Ray and Roger Corman being who they are, Roger Corman wouldn't pay for test footage. So he ended up shooting this test footage with his own money and thus owning the rights to it. So he was able to use the test footage he used for Roger Corman and recycle it into this before he actually made the movie Attack of the 60-Foot Centerfold, which is why there's some production value, and they probably would not have had that otherwise. We also had some stuff from Dinosaur Island. They used just the same set that was still around from Dinosaur Island and just filmed some extra stuff with Dan Golden and Steve Barquette there. And then Steve Barquette shows up later as the sheriff who's trying to shut everything down. He's done a couple of Fred Olen Ray movies and not much else.
So this is funny because the first thing when I told my wife I asked if she wanted to watch it, I was like, I'm watching this soft porn about this Bikini Drive-In, and my wife is a constitutional attorney. And so her first thing was like, that sounds like a First Amendment lawsuit waiting to happen, which of course they don't go into like the fallout of that, but that basically is what happens. And that was like, at this time it hadn't happened yet, but like there basically is real world equivalents to this in the world of coffee. Where there have been several like bikini barista places that like cities have tried to outlaw them, and basically like those laws are usually not considered to be First Amendment compatible because they're not neutral. They're pointed at a specific type of expression, which is girls in bikinis serving you coffee, and you can't do that. The First Amendment prevents that. So that was our first thought was that sounds like a First Amendment lawsuit waiting to happen. And then there is an actual plot point where a cop shows up and tries to shut down the drive-in because there's naked women at the snack bar.
Communist naked women.
Communist naked women, yeah. Our evil Mr. Winston calls up the police when he realizes that his son is on the side of these drive-in hooligans and tells the cops they're communists. And then we get a comedic take of the sheriff coming in and he stops Ross Hagen and them from robbing the money of the drive-in, but then like tries to hold everybody hostage. That's the very end of the movie. I do want to talk about some of these cameos, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Also, I mentioned it earlier, but we kind of glossed over the girl in the Napalm Death t-shirt who kicks Carl in the nuts when he's in the monster's outfit, which is...
So it turns out that's just one of Christopher Ray's friends. He was just like, hey, will you be in the movie and kick me in the balls? And she's like, yes. So
Absolutely.
I would do that. So yeah, we've got director Rolf Koninsky from There's Nothing Out There. We've got Donald Glut, who made Dinosaur Valley Girls, and like to your point earlier, the plot of Softcore and the plot of Kid Stuff is basically the same. In addition to making stuff like Dinosaur Valley Girls, he wrote on episodes of DuckTales and wrote an episode of X-Men. So that's Donald Glut. Then we've got Dan Golden shows up, who is the director of Naked Obsession, and he was the second unit director of Direwolf, which is our episode premiering on Wednesday. Then we've got a guy who I recognized right away, but probably shouldn't have, is Jim Wynorski shows up as the dude getting the blowjob in the car in these scenes. And
She says, that's the biggest monster I've ever seen, and he goes, thank you. But there is, again, going back, there is equal opportunity. There is a car cunnilingus scene that takes place in that... where the woman is in the passenger seat and her feet are like up... like next to the dashboard and the guy's head is down. Also, the "you're such a bore" gag is another like A+, like best 3 months of my life, and the "you're such a bore."
Yeah, no, it's perfect jokes here. Yeah, and we've talked about Forrest Ackerman in the car with the insect repellent already. It was Claire Polin who's playing his wife there, who was Ross Hagen's wife at the time. So our villain's wife was just jumped in there too, because it's... it kind of mirrors the plot of the movie of like, we're getting together to put on a show. Everybody has to chip in. So.
When you make movies for no money, you just like literally anyone. Even doing like YouTube, I've had to ask my wife to be a camera operator. She doesn't know anything. She knows nothing about that life, but I'm just like, can you help me like check the lighting and like focus the camera and like do
all
that's
hands
what you
on
do.
deck situation.
Mm-hmm.
We also
family business.
Yeah. I missed the cameo. I didn't see it. I didn't have time to watch it again. But I saw in the credits, and I checked on IMDb, that Stanley Livingston is in this movie, who played Chip Douglas on My Three Sons, which is another instance of like Fred Olen Ray just digging somebody out of the mothballs, which happens so much. Like this actor who, was popular 40 years ago, and he finds him, he's like, yeah, be in the movie. So
he's like a proto Quentin Tarantino, right? Actually, Tarantino had already done it by the time this movie came out, I guess. Maybe not before it was filmed, but...
Yeah, I mean, but, like, Fred Olen Ray has been doing it since the 80s, though, so...
Right, yeah, right. But it's like, I mean, and you kind of, like, love a guy like that, right? I don't know much about Fred Olen Ray personally, but everything that I've gleaned from just looking into this movie and watching this movie and talking about it, like, seems like he's a pretty decent dude. I mean, he's had 3 wives, so, like...
yeah, but he's 69 years old, so that's enough time to have 3 wives. It's not like...
Yeah, sure. I need to get on number 2 if that's stuff. I'm supposed to have 3 by the time I'm 69. Yeah, I'm like, but that thing of just like finding, old actors who might not otherwise get any work if some weirdo filmmaker who's really got a love for weird old stuff doesn't grab them and say like, hey, do you want to, like, it's an extreme example, but like, I think people now maybe, like, if you're not an elder millennial like the 3 of us, like, you may not realize that, like, John Travolta's career was, like, over until Quentin Tarantino cast him in Pulp Fiction. His career had been pretty severely on the downswing, basically, like, since the 70s ended, really. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's wrap up this movie.
All right. There's some loose ends.
Okay, so we mentioned before the police come to shut it down. Ross Hagen is trying to steal all the money.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Please stop that. And then how do they dispatch with the police? Meredith, kidnapping?
Everybody is on board with a plan to neutralize the sheriff in a delightful way. So the plan is to lock him away in the manager's office where he can do no harm and they can have their successful movie night. Waiting for him in the manager's office is either Mandy or Candy.
I think it's Candy.
I think it's Candy.
It's Candy dressed in a dominatrix outfit. Yeah. So he tries to escape. He is unsuccessful, and they have left the PA on. so that all of the dominatrix's commands and his obedient replies are heard throughout the parking lot.
So I am going to choose to believe that off camera, we do not see him giving enthusiastic consent and providing a safe word, which he chooses not to use because he does, in fact, have a full-blown humiliation kink, which I am not shaming. And that's what's going on in that scene, because the alternative is actually kind of gross, although he's a cop, so...
Yeah.
He's a cop, but he's also, from what we do see, very enthusiastically participating.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, right? He like makes a half-hearted attempt to escape.
Is it saying too much about me that I find this the sexiest part of the movie?
No.
Okay.
Like
good.
I said, I'm not kink shaming, although for your 20-year-old daughter's sake, I hope she doesn't listen to this podcast.
Oh my God, does she?
No, I don't think she does.
Yeah, I think it's weird, right? This is a weird moment because a lot of times again, we're going back to like the movies of this era, which is like, there are aspects of the 90s which now feel like we were living in a second version of the sexual revolution, when like there are weird like Puritans yelling on Twitter about things that aren't porn being porn because they're weird and terminally online. But also there's also some like weird repressive stuff going on. And it's like, I'm trying to get a read on this scene. So like, obviously, like I said, like, you know, my sort of desire to read this as like the man is consensual, but like, it's also like any man with a fetish for being domed is almost always treated as a joke in movies of this era. Like, there is not any sort of serious, none, I shouldn't say none, because there definitely are like you have to look to a lot of, honestly, like kind of horror movies or weird, to go into weirder stuff to find places where it's like, no, like a man with a dom fetish is like fine and healthy, and we're not going to kink shame that. But this movie does actually kind of feel like that is what I would say. This is the one moment of like borderline mean-spiritedness about sex in this movie, which is that, lol, isn't it funny that this guy's getting dommed?
It's weird humiliating somebody with a humiliation fetish, though, right? Like, we're through the rabbit hole there.
Well, sure. But again, me reading into it that he has a humiliation fetish is different than the way, like, that's extra textual, right? There's nothing in the film that presents that this cop actually has a humiliation fetish, except for the fact that I think it's kind of generally known that people who wield power in their day-to-day lives, or control, not even power is like a, in the case of cops, it's absolutely true, but like wield control, have to be in control, or want to be in control, or need to be in control during their normal lives, do often have submissive tendencies. So I think that was the only thing that really makes it a truly fair read, is like, no, that tracks, that he would be like, step on me, mommy.
You're right. It was a happy accident that he is enthusiastic.
Yeah, because otherwise they're just kidnapping the cop, and they're not really helping their case at all. But everything turns out fine, and the
bad guy literally just gives up and goes away.
Oh, they're having too much fun. I've been bested again.
I mean, I get, like, there is like a certain level of like, he recognizes that this is a money-making, because he says like, I wonder if they need a partner, which like implies that he's maybe going to invest in the Bikini Drive-In. That does make sense, but if he was really going to build like the next Mall of America on this tract of land, that's probably a lot more lucrative than the Bikini Drive-In, right? So I just don't really buy that he's just like, oh well.
Exactly. It's a weak point. Meanwhile, the night is a success. Kim and Brian share a victory kiss to celebrate. Our scream queen of the movie, she'd been locked in the trunk of a limo, but Oscar, the projectionist, frees her. She is grateful. They share a victory smooch.
Yeah.
We totally skipped over the nerds fucking in a pile of 35 millimeter film, by the way.
Yeah, because
they did that.
Which is real. That was real weird to me. Again, nope, I'm not here to kink shame. But as a person who loves film, that's a new one on me.
Yeah.
As a person who loves film, what do you think about the sensory experience that the actors were having in that moment?
I mean, Ted looks less bored than the dude in the opening bathroom sex scene, but not like, I wouldn't say he looks not bored.
Does he look like he's in pain from the film?
like
the
digging the
sprockets,
edges.
yeah.
The edges of the film, like giving him like paper cut equivalents. Yeah, I mean, kind of.
All over.
Yeah.
All over both of them. They are deliberately entangled in rolls and rolls of film.
Okay, not to push things even longer, but what's the point of bringing Michelle Bauer to the event when you're just going to lock her up in the trunk for the entire event?
No point whatsoever.
Yeah, I thought that like they were like the bad guys were going to try to like hold her for ransom or have her be like a hostage or something, and no, they just put her in the trunk, and then she's taken out of the movie for. Yeah, and then that's it. She's in the trunk.
Yeah.
And Daryl showed up randomly looking for Kim. Carrie says she's got a new man now. And he runs off, gets punched by Carl or somebody.
Yeah, in the monster suit, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then disappears.
Yep.
Yeah, he just disappears out of the movie, huh?
I mean, it's weird that he comes back in the first place, right? Like you would think that either he should come back to do something nefarious, or he should just be gone after she breaks up with him.
You gotta reach the 80 minutes for the cut version of this for USA Up All Night, so I think you gotta pad it out a little bit.
We also don't get confirmation that they made the $25,000.
I think it's implied.
Yeah, I want a big counter like in the Muppets of how much money they have.
Yeah, or like at the end of a UHF.
Yeah.
To that point, Kim spends the entire night dressed in her bikini, counting money in the manager's office instead of being front of the house showing off her body to attract more customers.
Also, by the way, speaking of padding out the movie, well, this I guess wouldn't apply to the Up All Night USA Up All Night version, but she shows off her bikini to land developer's son, and she's like, and he says something about how makes a joke about it, and she's like, well, I guess maybe I should take it off. And he's like, no, like, you need an expert to take off that string bikini. And then he goes and like pulls the string, and the thing starts to drop, and then they both go out of frame to the floor. They're just going to bang on the office floor. But then surprisingly, we don't actually watch them bang on the office floor. It's just implied, which is for a movie
we've already
like
seen
this
them
feels
bang.
weird.
What's the fun of that?
Well, Carrie, who had the first sex scene with her boyfriend Bobby, basically never see her again in the movie.
Yeah, she's presented as like the stalwart best friend who's going to help out through the whole thing, and then she's just gone basically after
She's basically introduced to keep, because we need the boyfriend character because he helps out pretending to be the chauffeur later on in the movie and does a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
and,
he ends up being
Michelle
more
Bauer.
pivotal to the.
Yeah, he's the chauffeur, but he's riding in the back with Michelle Bauer when they're on the limo, so I don't know how that works.
Magic.
But I was thinking, like, can't you just make the best friend character either Candy or Mandy, but then, like, no, you want a softcore movie, you want as many different boobs as possible. Really the goal there. Like, if you're editing this as an actual movie, you smush some of these characters together.
I mean, but so many of them have massive fake tits that.
I'm sure there are boob connoisseurs out there.
I mean, this is the thing, right? This is the thing that is like kind of a bummer about these movies, right? Except for like the bodybuilder chick, like they all have the exact same body type.
And they're all blonde.
Right, and that's also part of the weird, like I don't want to do that thing where it's like I'm going to shame these women because they're like prototypically attractive, and like I personally I'm not super into that, so I don't want to be like, oh, well, like if you have the sort of Barbie figure and big fake breasts, you're actually ugly, because that's not like the vibe I want to put out. But it is boring, right? In a movie like this, it's like, this is a less than 90-minute movie. There's a million naked chicks in it, and they all have the exact same figure, except for the one bodybuilder chick. It's like that Twilight Zone episode, the number 12 looks like you, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, there's a certain number of configurations, and we've got the 3 of those configurations, and here they are. And I'm going to get real weird with it here for just a minute.
Hey, you're in a safe spot.
I feel like you could remake this movie and have a super lot of fun with it, and actually make something that is like reasonably compelling and fun and sexy, with like go super hard on the homage to the drive-in and like those kind of movies and all of that stuff, and like have maybe a little bit like less really awful boring sex scenes, and like just a few different types of, like maybe some women with tattoos, or maybe some women that are a little curvier, or maybe some women that are a little skinnier, or maybe, get Ted in a banana hammock.
Yeah.
instead of the monster outfit, right? Like, I feel like there is a modern version of this movie that could be a lot of fun.
Same plot. Save
Right,
the
yeah,
drive-in.
same plot.
This is a plot that's worked since The Little Rascals. Like,
Right,
we've got to
yeah.
do something. They just threw in a little bit of the gas pump girls, like, let's be sexy to save it. All right, quick notes here is, one is Tom Shell plays Tom in this movie, and he played the dad in Cop Dog, which anytime somebody was in the movie Cop Dog, I have to talk about that because Cop Dog is an amazing, terrible movie. Two, we did not mention the most famous actor in this movie is actually John Carradine, who only shows up as the framed photo of Grandpa.
Oh my God.
John Carradine, if you don't know, is the patriarch of the Carradine family, David Carradine, Keith Carradine, all the way down to Martha Plimpton, and was basically making 1,000 movies in order to pay off all of his debts until the day he died. And three, a famous person who is not listed in the credits, but who Fred Olen Ray says worked on this movie, is a certain young man, remember this is filmed in 1994, who was living at his famous friend's house at the time and served as their casting director. And he had worked with Fred Olen Ray a couple of times otherwise as a casting director. And that man is Kato Kaelin.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I'm not going to explain who Kato Kaelin is to anybody under 35, but I was just like, holy shit. Kato Kaelin was living in OJ's pool house or whatever at this time when he was working for Fred Olen Ray, casting for Bikini Drive-In.
Kato Kaelin wished to be famous on The Monkey's Paw.
Yes, 100%.
Like, imagine putting in a bunch of work, doing stuff like casting Fred Olen Ray movies and stuff, and just really, you know, wanting to be famous, going out to California to become... Also, that's not even his real name, right? Like, that's like a pseudonym, I believe, isn't it?
I assume, yeah.
And then you end up becoming famous for testifying in, like, the trial of the century and for nothing else.
Yeah. Actually, his official title was Extras Coordinator, so not even caster, just coordinator. So, like, he was hurting the extras.
I mean, the extras coordinators get paid better than the extras, especially on a movie like this, where I'm going to guess the extras probably didn't get paid anything, because I'm going to assume this is probably mostly a non-union. Well, maybe not. Like I said, again, I don't know much about Fred Olen Ray. Maybe it was a fully unionized gig, but I feel like a lot of these actors probably didn't have their SAG cards yet.
Yeah, no, this was a cheap as dirt, filmed in 6 days production. I can't imagine anybody was doing union work here.
Also, I do need, actually, probably like the grips and stuff may have been. Like, the crew was more likely union than the performers. But can somebody please tell me what fucking accent the sheriff character is supposed to have?
California.
Southern California.
Nah, absolutely not.
I recognize that accent from half the time that a British actor does a Southern accent.
He was presaging Keanu Reeves' Southern accent in the Devil's Advocate.
So let's rate this movie starting with effort. Out of a 10-point scale, how would you rate this movie on effort?
For a Fred Olen Ray movie, everybody is trying. This is like a 7.5 for effort. I really think, like, this is hard-working people. I might even want to go higher, but I'm going to stick with 7.5.
That feels correct to me in terms of just, like, I think you can feel certainly Fred's, like, love of trash.
Yeah.
Like, one of my favorite reaction gifs is the Oscar the Grouch saying, "I love it because it's trash." Like, you can feel his love for trash, which mirrors my love for trash. That's the thing that really comes, like, because again, like, the sex scenes are pretty bad, but the scenes at the drive-in are
so
all fun. Yeah, are like all the cameos of all those people. This is the thing that you can feel like the you still only had 6 days to shoot it.
Yeah.
I would have believed they rented the camera if you didn't tell me he bought it from David Dakota. So I'm with that. I'll align with Kennedy on 7.5.
Awesome. How about on quality / production value?
Oh, I mean, things are mostly in focus. Harry Graver seemed like he worked with Orson Welles, so I feel like I can't fault him on anything he shoots. I don't know, 6?
Yeah, so I was going to say that I didn't mention it at the time, but when land developer's son stalks her to the beach, which is the exact same spot on the beach she was topless sunbathing earlier in the movie. Look, I watch a lot of cheaply made horror movies, and I have seen some real bad day for night in my time, but that might be the worst day for night shooting I have ever seen.
You need to watch a little movie called Hatfields versus McCoys by Fred Olin Ray, where it is so transparently day for night. There is light shining through the windows.
Yeah. It's like all you did was put like a blue gel over the... Actually, it might have been better if you just put a blue gel over the... It actually looks more like you just...
You color corrected
it. Looks like
it.
the color timing is just really shittily done, but just for that scene, which is like, that's kind of the worst version of day for night shooting, right? Like putting a blue gel over the camera, or like on modern, like I was on a movie once where like the way that they did day for night was modern cameras, they have like a white balance button, right? So what you're supposed to do is put like a bright white sheet of paper in front of the camera and then hit the white balance button, and it like gets the correct sort of color values, right? So the day for night in that movie, what they did is they held like something that was blue in front of the camera and hit the white balance button and then would shoot the night scenes. And that looked better, I think, than this, which is literally like, it feels like they sent it to the color lab and said, for these scenes, just fuck it up. Just do it as wrong as you possibly can.
So you could even tell on Vimeo.
Yes. Which again looks like I'm not going to buy the Blu-ray of this movie now because there is a 0% chance I would ever revisit this film, I think. But like, there's a part of me that is curious about like, what does the 1080p version of this that apparently was made from a new scan of the original negative look like? And it's honestly, this is from like a really niche distributor to buy the Blu-ray, but also they still have signed copies from,
do you buy it from Retro Media itself, Fred Olin Ray's company? Yeah.
Yes, if you buy... Oh, so that's his company. That makes sense.
That's his company, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's signed by Ashley Ray if you buy it from them. No, but this is kind of almost the kind of film where you kind of go like, but what if Vinegar Syndrome had done this, like, had put this on Blu-ray? I
think they would have to have us do the commentary track for it.
Like, Vinegar Syndrome's entire brand is like... not their entire brand, because there are definitely some movies where you're like, oh no, that's like a legit classic, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is Vinegar Syndrome, but like a lot of it is like trash that has no business having like a gorgeous 4K high def Blu-ray.
Wait, are you saying Champagne and Bullets doesn't deserve that treatment?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that maybe... no, I am saying that, yes. Champagne and... Like that's Vinegar Syndrome's whole, like, raison d'etre, right? Is taking just the weirdest garbage and giving it these Criterion-esque, like, loving remasters, right? And you kind of wonder, like... I just wonder, what does the standard Blu-ray from Fred Olin Ray's company that was remastered from the original camera negative, what does that look like compared to this like 480p that I watched on a 2K monitor that was just artifacted all the hell and back, and in 4.3, which again, if it was shot on 16 millimeter and transferred to 35 millimeter for some reason, that probably it was shot in wide. I mean, it doesn't look like it's framed to be shot in widescreen, so maybe it wasn't. Maybe they matted it into full, well, they wouldn't have open matte. They might have shot it open matte on 16 millimeter, so it was 4.3, I guess, but I would be curious to know. Not curious enough to spend $20, but curious nonetheless.
I might put on my Christmas wish list. Meredith, what do we got next?
Next up is entertainment value.
Oh, God. You know, the sex scenes are so boring, but the rest of the stuff is so fun. Like, the final act of this movie is a blast, and I'm going to give it a 7 based on that.
So wait, are we grading on like a Fred Olin Ray based curve, or is this like for any movie that I might potentially watch? Am I rating this out of 10?
I change all the time, so
yeah.
Let's say Fred Olin Ray curve for you, though.
Right. So like, if we're talking about like Skinamax porn curve, or like a Fred Olin Ray, you know, like is this as fun as Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers? No. Is it? I haven't seen that I'm aware of any of his Christmas movies, but it seems like he went from skin flicks to shitty Christmas movies, it seems like.
Which happens a lot with a lot of these directors. It's weird.
Super weird. Like, I'm sure this is way better than all of the Royal Christmas series of movies.
Royal Christmas on Ice we have not watched yet, but we did watch Christmas in Vermont, a Princess for Christmas, and a Christmas Prince. So,
well, there is a Christmas in royal fashion, a Royal Christmas engagement, and then a Royal Christmas on Ice. So I think, I mean, you really probably need to tackle the entire trilogy as quickly as possible.
Exactly.
But having not seen any of those films, I'm going to guess, just based on like what I know about basically like Hallmark Christmas movies, which is what it seems like that's kind of what he's doing now.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm sure this is on a Fred Olen Ray curve. This is probably close to a 10 out of 10. On a on a Skinamax soft porn scale, it's got to be in the upper echelon of that stuff for sure, because the sex is not like, again, if I was back to being a 14-year-old boy, definitely gets me what I want, right? But like as an adult who has also seen a lot more movies, that stuff is not really a draw whatsoever. It's all pretty much terrible and is like runs in the opposite direction of what it's intended to do for me personally. But in terms of like, yeah, the whole last act, all the stuff at the drive-in, all the really silly jokes, that I still do not understand why they picked a Don Quixote cartoon to project on their breasts. It's so weird, but I'm standing by my titting at windmills joke. That stuff is all super fun. So I would say, again, on a Cinemax porn curve, it's also probably in a like 8 or 9 or 10, maybe. As a movie that I have seen, like I'm going to put this on my Letterboxd and I will probably give it like 2 stars, which like it's better than the Neon Demon, which also had a lot of breasts in it.
See, I like the Neon Demon, but I would rather watch this than I'd watch The Batman.
Oh, see, I actually really liked The Batman.
Differing opinions. This is okay. We can get along.
But like, it's better than Mac and Me. It's better. Like, it occupies a similar space to Samurai Cop, even right down to the sex scenes, actually, because those are just tragically unsexy. Which again, like the gold standard of like unsexy sex scenes has got to be The Room.
Yeah.
But like,
especially since it's the same sex scene twice.
Yeah, but like Samurai Cop, like is approaching.
And
what's his name?
Harold Nakamura's like package shots in that movie, like yeah.
Right. You also get to see Robert Zadar bone down in Samurai Cop, which is amazing. But Milwaukee has some theaters that have good repertory programs, but when I lived in Nashville, and like the thing I miss the most about living in Nashville is the Belcourt Theater, which is a non-profit theater, had just the most amazing repertory program of any movie theater I've ever lived near. And I actually saw Hard Ticket to Hawaii on the big screen with an introduction from I can't remember the director's name off the top of my head.
Is that David Sedaris?
Andy Sedaris.
Oh, Andy Sedaris.
David Sedaris is an author.
Is the author, yeah.
Yeah. So his wife introduced, like via satellite. She wasn't there, but she introduced the movie.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so, like, if this movie played in a theater, I would 100% go see this movie in a theater with a rowdy midnight crowd.
What's our final? We got sense making?
Yeah, one more.
Okay. Sense making,
you got it.
I'm going to say 3 because...
3? It didn't make any sense?
I mean, no, like... It's a standard plot, so at least that part makes sense, but everything from the lawyer showing up on the beach to like, hey, why don't these people have money?
I'm sorry, what is the criteria that I'm judging it on now?
Oh, does this movie make any sense?
Yeah, it's got the same plot as like 100 like kids movies from the 90s. Save the going, like you said, going all the way back to the Little Rascals. Save the business from the evil land magnate. Like that part makes sense.
Just one scene to the next doesn't make any sense.
The 32-year-old college student dating the 40-year-old other college student who doesn't want to work because he's on summer vacation. Like, that shit doesn't make any sense. But, other than that...
I'm going to bump it up to 3.5. in terms of making sense. But, in terms of soft core, it's probably like a 7 out of making sense, so.
I mean, this is part of the whole, there's a whole series of bikini insert thing here. I feel like Bikini Car Wash Company was kind of the ur-text of the bikini business subgenre of skin flicks on late night cable.
I think Fred Olen Ray himself started making more and more bikini movies about 10 years after this. We already watched Bikini Jones and the Temple of Eros, and I think he had Bikini Airways and Bikini Royale, a Casino Royale parody, and a couple of those, and it's just bikinis everywhere.
I feel like in that, maybe you can provide some insight to this, but I apologize for my dog barking. I question the value and the proliferation of this kind of film, after the ease of access of internet pornography. Because if this is what I'm looking for, right? So again, just the millennial teen experience is you get anything that you can, any way that you can, because it was not easy. Even as a person who had internet in the 90s, it was still not that easy. I was talking to my cousin about this last night, actually. We were joking about it. You had a dial-up modem, made a horrific noise. And usually the computer was in a common area of the house, right? So if you are trying to look at internet pornography in the mid-90s, you better have a real good plan to get away with it as an underage person, right? Because you are going to get caught, probably. So Cinemax and even USA Up All Night, right? One of my friends, and I don't know if you remember this, Kennedy, but Eric and I talked on What a Maneuver once about how one of his tricks, and the kids now will never know the struggle, right? He would, during the free weekends, right? Because when you had, I don't think they do free HBO weekends anymore, but back in the day, you'd get your cable company would do free HBO or free Cinemax or free Showtime.
I had Dish up until a year ago, and they still did free weekends for Stars and Epics and stuff like that. Yeah.
They want you to watch some movies and be oh, this is actually super cool, I'm going to subscribe. But most people, I think, just tape a bunch of movies. So my friend Eric would sneak into the living room after everybody else was in bed, and he would tape the softcore porn and then hoard the VHS tapes of the softcore porn he taped off of the free Cinemax weekends, because that was what you had to do as a teen boy or a teen person attracted to women in the 90s. And I don't understand why anyone would. I mean, I know these are not expensive movies to make, but I'm not sure I understand why you would spend even the little money it costs to make a softcore movie post 2005.
I think most people still had relatively slow-ish internet and couldn't get super high-quality stuff until maybe about 2012, 2014, which is when you see the drop-off in these movies, at least in Fred Olen Ray's catalog. 2012 is the last of these bikini-style movies.
Is that when he made his pivot to Christmas?
I think he might have been making Christmas movies even before that. It was a slow transition.
What I need to know...
2012, we have Baby Dolls Behind Bars, and we also have A Christmas Wedding Date. And that is the same year he made Hatfields and McCoy's Bad Blood. Pretty much after that, it's no more busty but ladies. There's one movie called After Midnight in 2014 and Spedora. And occasionally you get an erotic thriller, but nothing kind of overtly softcore.
Now what I want more than I think anything in this very moment is for him to make a movie before he dies that is a merging of these two things. I need
Softcore Christmas?
Yes, I need softcore Christmas. That's what I need from Fred Olen Ray.
See, he needs to make my treatment of A Christmas, which ends with an orgy.
Exactly. This is what I need.
If you search M.L. Kennedy, The Christmas, I think it's online in multiple versions. So
there you go.
Including me doing a live reading of it, of the treatment somewhere on somebody's podcast. Anyway, we should probably wrap up. We've gone super long. Meredith's going to have a wonderful time editing all of this together. Anything to plug, Joe?
Probably the most visible place that I am is on YouTube. I just started a series of shorts that I will be doing throughout the month of December on YouTube about wintry and snowy and cold video game levels. So that'll be daily on my YouTube channel, which is... same name, different game. So it's youtube.com/same name, different game. If you want to follow me on the different socials, I am Joe on the Stick on Instagram, and I am shakewell.bsky.social on BlueSky. I have a vestigial Twitter account, but I haven't posted a new tweet in a year. and I'm not going to. So I just don't want someone to take my username. So probably don't bother with Twitter. Oh, and I guess like my puppet friend has a TikTok account. So Roger Retro Gaming Puppet on TikTok. If you're a Gen Zer who is interested in what a 40-year-old dude and a puppet think about old video games on TikTok.
Does the puppet have Riz?
The puppet has so much Riz.
It's like one of those Whatnot style puppets that
yes, he is a Whatnot. Yeah. He is a Whatnot.
Yeah. I have one at home too. It's my daughter's, but I have commandeered it. All right, well, thanks so much for being here, Joe. As always, I'm Kennedy, and
I'm Merida.
And keep watching the skies. No, terrible tagline. We need a better tagline.
Did this become a Howard Hawks podcast all of a sudden? Like, what?
We'd watch better movies then.
You would. That's true.
Going Over Our Freds was created and produced by us, Michael Kennedy and Meredith Halsey.
Our theme was composed and performed by Justin Nozick. Find more music for him at Bandcamp. Search for The Plague Physicians.
Artwork by Michael Kennedy. Special thanks to everyone who helped make the season possible, including the friends and family who let us watch these movies instead of this year's Academy Award nominees. And thank you for listening.
If you'd like to hear more from us, subscribe to Going Over Our Freds on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter at Goof Podcast, and find us on Instagram at Going Over Our Freds.
This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. For questions, comments, and complaints, email us at goingoverourfreds@gmail.com.
Thanks.
But probably shouldn't be using words like denouement in a podcast about Fred Olin Ray movies.
No, this is the podcast for it. Oh,
okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, fair. Okay.
This is a Fred Olin Ray podcast hosted by two University of Chicago grads with degrees in philosophy and psychology. So,
yeah. Well, I dropped out of film school to change to theater. So, so